So here we are, and we have this wonderful opportunity. We have guests, those of you who came in later. There's some friends that I've only known maybe, I don't know, 15, 20 years perhaps. I'm not sure exactly. But only about, actually known them as friends for about 15 or 20 years. And before that, always had read their works and heard about them. And Kabir Helminski would sometimes be on radio. We would hear about the world of Islam and so on. And what impressed me was, as a student of Persian and a Persian speaker and a Persian translator, is the great difficulty of bringing Rumi into our culture in a useful manner. And you immediately see a problem when the people who know the most about Persian, who would be Iranians, let's say, who are educated, but when they make a translation, even though they understand the original language best, the translations, they fall short in the receiving culture. So to know that, you would have to know the language, and you would have to know both languages, and you would see the problem. And as somebody who occasionally has to write book reviews, I'm often faced with how to say this delicately to the knowledgeable Persian reader in their own context, and the problem with many of the translations coming into English. So translation should always privilege the receiving language. That's the whole point of translation. And this is a very difficult thing to do. And so if you've seen the many translations over the decades that both of the Helminskis have prepared and published, they're some of the best in the field. And not only that, as a consequence of being initiated in the Mevlevi order, and in Kabir's case being Sheikh of the Mevlevi order, we have a reliable source of information about practice and perspective that we get a chance to. And so what I did is mention like such a well-known and also very controversial line from Rumi that I mentioned earlier, and I think most of you were here. And I wanted to know, I'm sure both of you must have thought just so much about this teaching, but also this very famous line, like earth-shaking kind of line. Huh? So what kinds of thoughts do you have?
Who wants to start? Well, addressing this idea, the Milleti Ashk, how beautiful it is that there's I take that word also to mean like a nation.
Yeah.
And, Rumi represents a certain archetype of the spiritual life. The archetypes of the spiritual life include, for instance, the high priest, the ascetic, the hermit, the yogi, the monk, the shaman. But what Rumi represents and demonstrates for us is the archetype we can call the lover. And is this something rare? Of course. Is it something abnormal? Or perhaps the highest level of normality? Is there anything in the Quran, for instance, that says very clearly what is the most important criteria for the faithful, for the mu'mineen? Can you think of anything in the Quran that actually says it really clearly? What is the most important criteria? So there is a verse, and it's a warning that should be heeded today and for the last 14 centuries. It says, if you Muslims fail to be faithful to this deen, to carry it forward, you can be replaced. With whom? Do you remember? Who will replace us? A people who will be stricter in Sharia than us. No, it doesn't say that. It says a people who will love God and whom God will love. So this is a very clear statement. What it all comes down to is that. So the archetype of the lover is not just some weird Sufi kind of thing, for some specialized people who love poetry and ecstatic music and things like that. No, this is what it is to become completely human. The Prophet, peace be upon him, was a lover, above all. Something has crept into Islam as it has crept into other religions before. So let me address that, because we should be really, really clear about this, about a very fundamental misunderstanding that needs to be addressed before we even go further. And that is, how do we win God's love? Love. How do we make ourselves acceptable to the divine? There seems to be a mentality, a very common mentality, that has become more and more influential in Islam. And I believe it began to enter in the 3rd Islamic century, when Muslims knew they needed to find a law, a system of law, because they didn't have it. When Islam spread across the world phenomenally, in the first 30 years and then in the first 100 years, the biggest expansion, the Sharia was not yet formulated. The Hadith were not collected. All there was the Quran and the moral energy, the spiritual magnetism of the revelation that had transformed people's lives. And boom, it spread across the world and transformed people, made people tender toward each other, patient with each other, supportive of each other, as if their lives depended on it. And our lives do depend on it. A few centuries later, Muslim scholars are looking for a system of law, because they don't have it. All they have is their tribal customs. That was what the Sunnah was, actually. Sunnah also meant, customary practice, and what they could remember from the Prophet, peace be upon him. But then it got formulated. When it was formulated, by Imam Shafi at first and others, the only model available, do you know what it was? It was rabbinic law in Arabic, the Jewish Sharia, and its key principles, which were taken right over into Islam. The 4 key principles of Islamic Sharia are borrowed directly from Jewish Sharia, which is fine. Nothing wrong with that. But at the same time, a mentality entered into Islam, which is a mentality that is foreign to the Sunnah of the Prophet. It's a mentality that says we please God the most by performing certain rituals, following very specific outer rules. This is how we please God. This was customary among the Jewish people. Is it the Sunnah of the Prophet? Well, you really look at how he solved problems, how he related to people. I would say his primary characteristic was one of flexibility. He really was. He always found, he would adjust. Well, you can't do that? Okay, try this. You can't even do that? Okay, try this. He was, and when asked, somebody came to him and said, Ya Rasulullah, this deen you're offering us is so huge. How much of it do we absolutely have to do? He said, as much, begin with what you can be regular with what you can do continuously. That was also verified by Aisha. She said, she was asked, what kind of acts did the Prophet love the most? And she said, he loved the most those things, those virtues that people were continuous with and become part of their practice. So this is what he was like. And he demonstrated tenderness, he demonstrated flexibility, even humility. In the final year before they entered peacefully into Mecca, he angered a lot of people by not taking a hard line against the Meccans. Everybody thought he was wrong. He says, no, cool it, we'll come back next year. We won't fight now. We'll just agree. We'll let it go. Next year, everyone walked back into Mecca in peace. It was a non-violent conquest. So, this mentality that somehow Allah is an accountant ticking off, columns of good deeds and rewarding us. Oh, reward him for that, reward her for this, minus here. That God is an accountant, or that God is a cop looking to bust you. Is this Islam? Is this what a prophet would bring? The prophet is the embodiment of universal intellect, of the Akali Kul. What the prophet speaks is the intelligence of the universe. These other things are human figments of human imagination, bringing God down to a very low level of transactions, of reward and punishment and fear. It's a religion of fear. Islam is a religion of love. Rumi, we call him Mevlana, talks about what madhab he belonged to. Madhabi Ashq. Once his most beloved friend, after Shams had passed away, I think it was Husamuddin, said, "Oh Mevlana, you are Hanafi, I am Shafi. What if I convert from Shafi to Hanafi, and then we will be like one?" And Mevlana just left. He said, as long as you're involved with this, you're not with the truth. I hope this is not too radical for our friends here.
No. They've heard pretty extreme things. Actually.
Sometimes we have to be radical to get to the truth.
Yeah.
If we live in a radically distorted reality, if this distortion has happened to all human endeavors. And yes, dear.
And actually he said at that moment, bring this love also to the Shafi.
Yes, of course. So Mevlana understood that this life is a school of love, and all the most important lessons are lessons of love. All the most memorable experiences are experiences of love. And what every human being wants to experience and to be with is the reality of love. Of course, it's not a love that wants to possess. Rumi said also the greatest love is love with no object. And yet we begin, a little child loves a teddy bear. The teddy bear is not even alive. And yet that teddy bear becomes an object of the child's love, and in some ways even returns it. There's something going on. You can call that metaphoric love. In fact, that's what the Sufis call it, ashq mejazi, right? But what's not metaphoric love when it comes to anything other than love of God? Everything else is metaphoric love. And yet that doesn't diminish it. That doesn't mean it's pointless or worthless, unless we focus in such a way as to be so attached and possessive, and then perhaps controlling, and then jealous. Love is corrupted. So Mevlana is this great, great teacher of this highest reality. And as a creative genius, he could demonstrate that a truly spiritual life, a life that was completely in union with Haqq, is also a creative life. That our religion does not need to be black and white, either or a religion of fear, or a religion primarily of rules. The rules we need, we should know what they are. We should know what the ethical, moral boundaries are, of course. But that is not the primary way to receive the divine love. Rumi also says that God, Allah, has his armies, and Allah has his marching bands, and Allah has his police and his firemen and his bureaucrats. But Allah also has his close friends who he has invited to a feast to enjoy the intimacy of that togetherness, of that closeness. And that closeness is the definition of a saint, of a wali. A wali literally means the one who is close. And there's a beautiful ayat that we should make a banner out of, and we should have somebody go into all the mosques we know of in the middle of the night sometime and string up this banner. And it's an ayat from the Quran that says, the faithful men and women are awliya for each other. Meaning friends, supporters, protectors, saints. Now, we don't have any books with us, but Camille, could you recite something for us? And if I give you this microphone,
I can
hold
that
it.
way you can.
You're thinking of your joy.
How does a creative spiritual genius begin to describe the nature of the divine and the divine love? An example.
This is an offering from Mevlana's heart from a section of the Masnavi. And in a moment he says, "Oh my God, our intoxicated eyes have blurred our vision. Our burdens have become heavy. Forgive us. You are hidden, and yet from east to west, you have filled the world with your radiance. Your light is more magnificent than sunrise or sunset. And you are the inmost consciousness, revealing the secrets we hold. You are an explosive force, causing our dammed up rivers to burst forth. You whose essence is hidden while your gifts are manifest. You are like water, and we are like millstones. You are like wind, and we are like dust. The wind is hidden while the dust is plainly seen. You are the invisible spring, and we are your lush garden. You are the spirit of life, and we are like hand and foot. Spirit causes the hand to close and open. You are intelligence. We are your voice. Your intelligence causes this tongue to speak. You are joy, and we are laughter, for we are the result of the blessing of your joy. All our movement is really a continual profession of faith, bearing witness to your eternal power, just as the powerful turning of the millstone professes faith in the river's existence. Dust settles upon my head and upon my metaphors, for you are beyond anything we could ever think or say. And yet this servant cannot stop trying to express your beauty in every moment. Let my soul be your carpet.
Amen, amen, amen. In a way, this passage that Camille has recited, you could hear it as a commentary on La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah al-aliyyil azim. There is no power nor agency but with God. You are joy and we are laughter. All our movement is really a continuous profession of faith. Just as the powerful, he describes the millstone being turned by the water. He says the powerful turning of the millstone, which you could say is all of our action, professes faith in the river's existence. It seems absurd, of course. It's obvious. The river, the water from the river is turning the millstone. But it's not so obvious what water is turning us until we have that faith and that spiritual perception. But coming back to the principal idea that love is the final criteria, the most important value in human life, Rumi also has something else to say, which is really important. And he says, love is like a lawsuit. So far it's all been nice and sentimental and sweet. But he says, love is like a lawsuit. The judge wants to see your evidence. You claim to be a lover. What evidence do you bring? This is where our human relationships are the evidence. Our being true in every moment to the highest truth, being faithful to the highest truth, and not indulging in trivialities and cheap distractions or untruths. That takes away our evidence. So how can we, in this lawsuit of love, bring forth the evidence of our innocence, of our faithfulness? And that's why we have schools like this, to begin to learn how to live this truth, how to make this love real, and not just let it be something literary, some words that we mouth, but something we remember to make real as much as we can remember.